Yes.
First of all, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the She Critiques podcast.
Yeah.
I'm so elated to have you. Like, I listened to the podcast on HBO and I watched the show Lovecraft Country. I'm a huge fan. So this is like, I think you only get nervous when it's like something that you want to do and it's people who inspire you. Like, oh my God, like, oh my God, Spike Lee. Like when someone else might. So happy to have you. Let me introduce the people to who you are. Shannon Houston. Shannon Houston is a poet, a critic, and TV writer. Her work has been heavily influenced by her strange times coming of age in Boston, Cleveland, and New York. Houston graduated from Sarah Lawrence College in 2011 and went on to become a pop culture writer and TV and film critic. In 2016, Houston transitioned to the TV world after selling a pilot to Amazon. She has since written on Hulu's The Looming Tower, Amazon's Homecoming, Hulu's Little Fires Everywhere, HBO Max's Station 11, and HBO's Lovecraft Country. Her passions include visual art, music, baby making, and Black women up to no good. She lives in Southern California with her 3 children and their beloved turtle, Miss Shannon Houston. Welcome to the She Critiques podcast. That's a virtual.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I was going to start somewhere else, but the line that struck me in this bio was Black women up to no good. So I got to go there. What does Black women up to no good look like?
I mean, you saw it. You saw Lovecraft Country, you know. I love these women who do what the fuck they want, really, to be honest. I love characters who take risks. I love characters who go on adventures. My passion is definitely writing female and or femme characters who don't play by the rules. And I think as television and film is opening up to more Black stories and Black female-centered stories, I do think that there's going to be that danger of only telling stories where we look good, only telling stories where we do the right thing. And so I'm really excited about more stories where we do crazy things, where we don't make all the right decisions, where we stay in the multiverse and don't go home to our kids. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so you sound like a breaker of rule, so to speak. A rule breaker, I would get, yeah.
I try to break as many rules as I can. All my favorite heroes broke a lot of rules. All my favorite women do. So yeah, I would like to do that.
I love that. And I love to see Black women breaking rules on screen. It kind of gives us the open door to kind of, in our own lives, just kind of bend the wire a little bit.
Absolutely.
So my original introduction for this episode was gonna kind of dive into who Howard Phillips Lovecraft was, because I did a little research, just a little bit, but I'm sure you know more than I do. That was another intimidating factor. Your podcast is so good. I'm like, these ladies are smart with a capital T.
Oh, thank you.
But H.P. Lovecraft, he was an American horror writer in the early 1900s who was clearly a white supremacist and a racist. And although his work has inspired very prominent filmmakers today, Ridley Scott, Stephen King, Guillermo Tormo actually said something as well that he inspired him. So my question is more so, do we hold our artists accountable for who they are and not judge their art? Because I do feel like in society right now, we kind of get in that limbo too, where we love the arts from the artists, but then we find out who they are and it's like, ooh. So how do we hold artists accountable?
I think you can do a lot of things at one time. You can acknowledge that you like R. Kelly's songs, and then you can go, yeah, it was all there. Those awful things that you did explains a lot of lyrics in the songs that we loved. And some people like me, I don't listen to R. Kelly anymore. It hurts. There are certain songs where I'm like, I really wish I could play this right now. Then there's also that rabbit hole of, well, he wrote so many songs too. So you're listening to other artists that, you know, like, so it's not that it's not complicated, but I'm like, but you can do both of those things at once. You can say, damn, I love those songs. Damn, those influenced me in a lot of ways, and I don't want to listen to them anymore, or I can't listen to them anymore. Maybe some people have found a way to listen to the songs, but still fight against male supremacy and the patriarchy and rapists, you know? So I don't think that there's one way to do it, but I'm like, you can acknowledge that Lovecraft was an incredible writer whose work is the foundation of cosmic horror, and he's a racist. We have to do this in history. We have to do this with politicians. We have to do this with like so many American quote unquote heroes. So I think we need to all find a way to talk about a lot of different things at once and to let them be complicated too.
Mm-hmm. I guess, is that tribute to Misha Green for naming the show Lovecraft Country? Is that?
Well, Misha's show is named Lovecraft Country because the book by Matt Ruff is called Lovecraft Country. And Matt Ruff, as a white guy, was also trying to acknowledge, like, yes, we love H.P. Lovecraft. He built these worlds, or I should say, we love the work that he has done, and also acknowledging that there's racism in that work. Of course there is. You know, that's why we read the poem on the podcast, because it's like, it's not escapable. You can't sit here and say that a racist can create something that's wonderful and beautiful but has no tinges of that racism in there. Of course it's in there. So Matt Ruff wrote the book, you know, grappling with that, and then Misha makes the show that's grappling with the book, that's grappling with the legacy, and, you know, lots of other things. So it is a strange thing because they are all in conversation with each other, but that feels very true to this country. That feels very true to the way America works.
Well, so when this came across your desk, this idea of Lovecraft Country, what was the initial thought behind getting behind this and wanting to be a part of the project?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't complicated. I watched Underground. I was a huge fan of Underground. I wrote reviews of Underground when I was a TV critic and editor at Paste Magazine. So I was like, whatever Misha Green is doing, the fact that it's coming across my desk is, you know, an honor in and of itself. And then I read the script and I loved what she was doing. And I was also scared. I was totally like, this is insane. It's scary, and I don't really do scary that much. So I don't even know if I'm right for it, but I could see that she was doing this thing that I love, where she takes a really big story and then she makes it about family. And Underground was about, obviously, like a group of enslaved people trying to escape. And it was also about complicated family relationships and dynamics during that time. And that's not easy to do. That's something that you do if you really care about characters and you really understand that characters drive the story. So I saw that very clearly in the pilot that I read. And I knew from watching Underground that she was going to go to some crazy places, and I was excited and scared, yep, all of that, to be along for the ride. I was like, this is going to really push me, and it did, and it was a great experience.
Absolutely. What does Misha's leadership look like in the writer's room? Like, I want to be a fly on the wall in that writer's room so bad, like, just to see what these conversations look like.
I would describe her as that professor in college who is like riding you, who's like sees your potential and is like, oh yeah, you have the potential to be to do X, Y, and Z, but you're scared or you're holding back. You're not pushing yourself. Let me help you out. And those are always my favorite professors. And so that's how it was with her. I think it's gonna sound a little cheesy, but I refer to her as my Beyonce, my person out in the cosmos who's like, you're not in a prison. You're here to grow and to learn and to go on an epic adventure. And to me, that's how she is. And the way that she thinks is so like otherworldly sometimes that it can be frightening and uncomfortable. Like, and that's the experience that you have watching the show. You're like, this is very strange and uncomfortable. Wait, no, I'm having fun. Wait, no, I don't like that. Like, all of those emotions were felt on a daily basis in that room. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would do it a million times over with her. Like, she's just so incredible. And I think it is that thing of coming out of that room. I'm like, I'm again, like, I can't believe I was a part of it. I'm so excited that I was even in there, like, pitching both really bad ideas and a few really good ideas.
Out of the bad comes the good, yeah.
So yeah, it was great.
You were talking a little bit about the characters as well, and like their layering. They're layered so well. Like, I feel like each episode we learn just a little bit about each of them that takes us into the next episode. One of my favorite characters to watch in the show is Ruby. Like, I don't, something about Ruby for me is like her strength and resilience, but she's also very soft and vulnerable sometimes. So that's like this duality of who she is. Yeah. But so I was gonna say, because I recognize for me in the finale, it almost seems like Ruby was willing to sacrifice her love with Christina for almost like an acceptance in a love with Letty. Yeah. And analysis, and since I have you, I want to be correct. So am I anywhere near correct on that one?
I think Ruby wanted it all. I think in Ruby's perfect world, she would have been able to stay with Christina, learn magic, do crazy things, and she would have been able to protect Letty. And so I think she's torn at the cemetery when Letty is like asking for her help. Maybe she's not torn. Ruby's just like, go fuck yourself. Can we swear on this?
Yes, absolutely. It's encouraged.
Ruby's like, go fuck yourself. And we talked about this in the room. What I love about Ruby is a selfish character. Not necessarily, maybe selfish is the bad word, but like out for self, a person who's like, no, I'm going to put myself first. And we talk about this concept all the time. We talk about self-care. But I'm like, Ruby really was like, from the beginning, from the pilot, like this, our family is troubled. Letty, you have issues. You run around. I support you. I'm the responsible one. Like but she's always taken care of herself. And I love that about her. And like you said, there's also this vulnerability there. Like, she can be hurt. She's not immune to the things that Letty does in episode 3 when Letty lies to her about where the money came from for the house. That really does hurt Ruby. They don't speak for a while. So I love that about her. And yes, I think in the cemetery scene, she's like, and notice I keep saying I think, because I'm like, it's complicated. I have my own opinion about what's happening in a scene too. But that scene to me is Letty saying, I need you to make one more sacrifice for this family. And Ruby's like, I understand you've gone on some kind of spiritual journey, but I'm here. I'm where I've always been. I've always been out for this family. Oh, now you want us all to come? It's that same thing of like, but you're still asking me to sacrifice something, and I have to break up with the person I'm with, or I have to go behind her back, and your boyfriend is kind of trash too. Like, right. So it's like, I don't want to do that. And then I think when she gets back to the room with Christina, that's a complicated scene too, because on the one hand, I think there is real romance between the two of them. On the other hand, I think Ruby is like, I don't want anything to happen to my sister, and I do want to help her. Like, there is something wrong with the fact that my girlfriend wants to kill her boyfriend to ascend. You know, it's... Yes. But yes, I think in the end she goes, all right, let me make a choice. And the choice is to steal the stuff, the potion for Letty, and it goes awry. So, but I don't know if it's as simple as, okay, I'm on Letty's side now and not Christina. You know, like, we have to let people be complicated. It's hard to choose your family sometimes, especially when that's done a lot of work. So that's what Ruby's going through.
You mentioned too with Tick kind of being not the best boyfriend. So the thing is, okay, everybody's obsessed with Jonathan Majors. I mean, come on, let's go.
Listen. Yes, agreed.
But so I follow Demetria Lucas on Instagram. Okay. She does some really interesting feedback for each episode of Lovecraft, and she's a part of a Facebook group. I'm gonna read you this, right? She's a part of a Facebook group who discusses each episode every week. And the topic for that week was, is Ruby jealous of Letty and Tick's relationship? And the women were going back and forth like, no, she's not jealous. And then one woman said, jealous of what? Okay, read it. A good man where Tick is unemployed and living off Letty in her house, and he knocked her up with no ring in the 50s. And he called his ex in Korea, the lady that he wined and dined, and popped up at Letty, and she popped up at Letty's house, and even took Letty, hasn't even taken Letty on a proper date, and she's pregnant. He doesn't communicate right, and he has anger issues. Letty is hanging around with a magical Negro who already got her killed once and nearly gets her killed every episode. Who the fuck is jealous of that?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Here's the thing. That is exactly how Ruby feels. Ruby is like, wait, I'm supposed to do what for who? So I think that's exactly Ruby's perspective. And also, yes, we would talk about this in the room all the time. We would be like, he does not even have a job. I was very upset. He's in her house. He's making long distance calls. I was very upset about that. We know he has to call Korea, but who's paying the bill? These are valid questions. I love that. I love that perspective. I also love, there's also the perspective of something that's a hard truth, which is when you meet somebody, you're meeting them at that stage in their life, right? So Letty can't have the Atticus that we saw in Korea because he's not that person anymore. After everything he's experienced, after he had a traumatic experience with his first love, she's now getting that version of that guy. And that kind of does suck for Letty. But she's on an adventure with him in a very different way than what Gia was having in episode 6. So no, I also agree. I don't think Ruby is jealous of Letty and Atticus at all. I don't like to squash any fan theories because again, that's the point of the show, to get you like, you're emotional, you take sides. So I respect that camp, but I'm on Ruby is very settled into who she is. Like, any version of the story where you think we were telling a story about a Black woman who isn't happy to be Black, we specifically put lines in throughout the series to let you know she's very confident in the way she looks. She is very confident in her body. There's no, this is the 50s. That's a bombshell right there. And so we are telling a complicated story about that woman who actually does love herself. And it gets complicated, right? Because we don't live in a world that really wants a beautiful Black woman to love herself.
Absolutely.
And that's what she's bucking up against, not her own feelings about who she is, not her own lack of love. Like, Ruby's been having a great love life, as far as I'm concerned, from the time we meet her to before then. Like, she's not lacking in that area. She's not lacking in attention. She's not lacking in people throwing themselves at her. Again, we don't, this is the Ruby in my head that exists before the show starts. So I don't think that it's that. And we've talked a lot too about, again, in the world of don't simplify the story. You can have two sisters who are both happy in their lives, technically. Like, of course, our characters are going on a journey, but like, they don't have to be jealous of each other per se for there to be tension. It can just be, I'm tired of being the responsible one. You do whatever you want. I don't feel supported. You're selfish like mom. No, you're selfish like mom. Like, there's a lot that can go on that doesn't necessarily have to do with jealousy per se.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think Ruby is the most explorative female, I think, on the show. Like, just willing to put her toe in a lot of different waters. So yeah, I give that kudos to that. And nobody, never mind. I was gonna say, Tick, piggybacking off of a lot of, a Black woman and holding her accountable for what he's experienced in the past is not a new story for a lot of Black men.
Okay,
that's a different conversation.
Yes, but yes, all of that.
Yes. And then moving on to D for me, that's the last character I really kind of wanted to comb through a little bit, because for me, D is so representative of like Black children who aren't necessarily, like, we want to protect them, but we can't protect them in a way. and they have to grow up so fast. Like our black children to me are forced to grow up very fast and make decisions very early on. And they just don't have the luxury of leisure. It's just not afforded in that capacity. Some, but I guess the question is, was it structured like that purposely for that type of narrative? What was what were you trying to convey?
Yes, on the one hand, yes, absolutely. I think what we're saying is, of course, Black children play, because all children play. That's how they communicate. Of course, they have fun. All children have fun. The way that fun and that leisure and pleasure is complicated by racism and sexism, it's the Ruby idea of there's actually nothing complicated about being a Black child until you're a Black child in America, in, you know, with all of the weight of that. But the actual innate, whatever is innately true of children is true of Black children. And then we put them in this country and they're interrupted constantly.
Right.
So I think that's part of the story that we're telling. Like, yes, in a perfect world, Diana would just draw comics all the time and she would grow up to be an artist. And very early on, that's complicated. And I think, you know, people forget how much Diana went through because we didn't focus on her as much throughout the first few episodes. But you're like, episode 2, her dad dies. Episode 3, she has a weird encounter with a Ouija board, where she's like, is my dad a ghost? Like, she, like Hippolyta, I think she's sensing there's something that I don't know about what happened to my dad. Then her mom is losing it because her mom is like, oh, I know they're lying. And, you know, so you have those moments where she's like, mom, what are we doing? Why aren't we going back to Chicago? Where are we? So she went through a lot. Her mom is then not there physically present for her at another huge blow, which is losing her best friend, Bobo. And then she gets chased by 2 devil dolls. Like, she's assaulted by the police. I'm like, I know in a different show, she would have been painting at the end of the series and she would have, you know, gotten to be free in the way that we like to think of our Black children as free. But this is Lovecraft Country. This is a very different kind of show. So what we envision for an empowering moment for her is complicated, right? It's this final scene and she makes a strong choice. And what we're saying is she makes that choice because of everything she's experienced over these 10 episodes, which is like a lot of violence at the hands of white people. And in particular, her best friend being dead because of the words of a white woman. What do you think she's going to do with that robot arm? So this is also like, again, the daughter of Hippolyta. Hippolyta has now told her, you can literally be anything, do anything. I've seen it. I'm here to show you. So she has a different type of Black mother now than the mother she had in episode 1. And all of that is important. And so, yes, I think on the one hand, there's a tragedy, right? That if we just want our little Black kids to just be little Black kids and not ever have to think big thoughts or make strong choices, we're not really going to get that a lot of the time in this present day America. But the alternative isn't necessarily bad. The alternative could be exciting if we let it be. We also are telling a story about how it is always the young people. It's always the young people moving a movement. It's never, the truth is, even us in our 30s and 40s, it's not us because we get settled.
They're inspiring us,
Yes, we have kids, we have families to think about. Like, it always has to come from the younger generation. So I think we were trying to tell that story too.
Absolutely. You talking about Hippolyta, because I know you were the head writer for episode 7. I am centering
co-writer with Nisha. Yes.
Okay, I'm co-writer. But centering Hippolyta and her journey of identifying herself. What was the approach to that episode? And then birthing that as well. Was there any painful in birthing that episode? Anything painful?
Everything. Every episode was painful to birth. You know, every episode had really tough, complicated things where we were you know, arguing passionately in the room about things. So I always say that to the fans who are like, oh, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm like, same, you know, like it's not, that's kind of the point. So yes, it was hard because we wanted to tell the story. Basically, we wanted to tell the story of her going through therapy. Hippolyta has been through, and all of our characters, right? They've all been through a particular trauma, and then we want to show how they work with it and through that trauma. Mm-hmm. And so Hippolyta's been through a lot. And we also we were constantly asking ourselves, how can we get away from the very simple narrative of like what racism looks like? Because in television and film, in so many of our stories, racism is a man swinging from a noose. Mm-hmm. Racism is the police shooting somebody in the back. It's never what Hippolyta is describing in Paris, which is like, I actually have exactly what I thought I wanted. I had that. I had a family. I had my husband that I was helping run a nice business that was helping our community. Like I technically had everything that was supposed to make me happy. So why was I so angry? And the answer is racism. The answer is still racism, but it just looks a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Nobody, you know, we talked about aversion. I had said to Misha once, I was like, well, maybe when she was younger, she grew up in the South and she saw a lynching. And Misha was like, no, we don't need to do that. Like, we need to give it more nuance, basically. Like, what's the other version of racism that isn't that obvious thing that we always go to? Yeah. Oh, it's a middle-class Black woman who is actually a genius, it's not even necessarily that she should have been a scientist. It's but that she should be, you're shrinking yourself, and also everybody around you is helping you shrink. But it's like, you should have been anything, but you couldn't even imagine that. And you were cut down in little ways, like trying to name a comet and marrying a man who loves you, but also is very comfortable with you just staying at home and all of those things. So it was difficult to get to like those complicated things, and to also want to be able to talk about sexism and to say, like, we have this amazing character in George Freeman, and also he was complicit too. Yes, we love George. We love the characters, but none of them are perfect, you know? So that scene between George and Hippolyta was tough because we wanted it to be romantic. We wanted the audience to like feel so happy that George was back. And we wanted Hippolyta to have that moment of like, thank you, God, because that's a big part of grief. I just want to see this person one more time. I just want to wake up to them one more time. So we wanted all of that. And then we also wanted her to say, but you were a part of shrinking me. And that's partly how I ended up here. And where do we go from here? So we wanted it to do a lot of different things. And that wasn't simple to do, but I'm excited because I do think that people got it. And I think, again, to the question you asked earlier about Lovecraft, it's like, people go, well, how can we talk about this and talk about this at the same time? How do we acknowledge this and acknowledge this? And it's like, that's a great example of a scene that does that, where it's like, I love you, I missed you, you're my everything, and you did something deeply, deeply wrong.
Yes.
And we need to unpack that.
Is that not every therapy session? You're like, okay, I need to confront this person because yes, I hear you. So I have a few rapid fire questions, kind of like a lightning round.
Sure.
Really quick. So in your opinion, the most polarizing episode in Lovecraft Country episode, season 1.
Polarizing episode. I mean, I would have to go with 5.
Okay.
For me, polarizing.
Okay. Favorite actor to watch execute a scene? Doesn't have to be on Lovecraft though.
I mean, Journey Smollett as
amazing in this. Period. But this is like
so many incredible performances, and it's unfair to ask me to choose one because actually every single character ran through my head. I thought of Montrose in episode 9. I thought of Hippolyte in episode 7. Like, the answer is technically all of them, but when Letty does the exorcism, you're like, oh, that's not acting. You are really this person. Like, you can pull that from inside of you. So yes, Journey Smollett.
You even saying that, thinking of every different character. This is a sidebar, but I just did an episode on Waiting to Exhale, and we were talking about those women. And did they know 20 years from now that that cast was so magnificent? And I think with the cast that you have in Lovecraft is like 20 years. I mean, you already know this. That's the crazy thing. So I wonder if people who are making like magical art at the time, you know that it's magical when you're touching it, like when it's just tangible right there.
Yeah, I think it's yes and no. Like, in the room, in the writer's room, I'm like, this is gonna be crazy. And then when I actually started seeing the episodes, I was like, oh my God, this is literally this is 10 times what we thought it was, or what I thought it was in the room. And then you see it again through the eyes of the audience. So I always say that too. A thing that you've worked on is constantly evolving. It's not going to mean the same thing in 5 years. It'll mean something else in 10 years. And I think that is proof that you've made something powerful. And I think that that's true of this show.
Yes. Favorite horror film?
I'm gonna say, and I'm still newly diving into horror, so there's so much that I haven't seen, but one movie that took my breath away that I think about all the time is The Witch. And it came out a few years ago. And that one was like, I just felt so a part of that creepy world. I felt so invested in these creepy characters. And then the ending, like, that's one of my top ones. I also love, along the lines of like what my taste is, there's a movie called Prevenge, which is about a pregnant woman going on a murder spree, as she's like overcome with grief, and I just loved it.
Okay, I'll check that out. Will there be a season 2 of Lovecraft Country? I gotta ask. The people, you do know people will kick me if I did not ask.
You have to ask. We don't know yet. I'll say I don't know yet. Let's say that. I don't know yet. I think we asked Misha on the podcast what should everybody watch after Lovecraft season 1, and she said Lovecraft season 1, and I think that gives me comfort. I'm like, there's so much in season 1. You could just watch it again.
I'm gonna listen
and feel like you're watching a completely different show. So I recommend doing that, and we'll see what happens.
I will say the podcast by far is like, it just goes hand in hand for me. Like, I have to watch my Sunday night episode of Lovecraft, and then I have to turn into the podcast, because for me, it just fills in. If there was a blank, sometimes I'm watching it and I'm so in awe, I lose myself in the story and I don't know what I just watched. So the podcast like reiterates like, oh yes.
Yes.
I didn't know that. What do you want us to take away from Lovecraft Country?
No one particular thing. Like, if there was one scene that you can't get out of your head, that's it. Take that scene, go build something from that. Like, as an artist, I would be honored to be a part of anything that's inspiring other artists. That's why I post so much fan art, because it's like, I love that. I'm more excited about the stories that people will tell after having seen this. I guess I would say I hope that people feel a little freer to tell whatever weird ass, strange ass story that's been swirling around in their head. And if we've opened the door even a little bit for that, then I'll be happy. But I just hope people feel more free to tell those stories and to do whatever needs to be done, go through whatever multiverse you need to go through to have that strength to keep making things and to keep doing things. Because as much as we packed into this, we touched, like, it's the tip of the iceberg for the millions of stories that Black creatives could be telling right now. So I'm just excited to see what everybody does.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I slid in your DM and you were a real one. Like, yeah, what's up, girl? I was like, what? Oh, she responded. I wouldn't suggest anybody else do that. I'm just saying it works.
I'm like, I got a lot of unread DMs. I will get to them. But yes, I was excited to hear from you, and I'm so excited to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.